Well, I mean, Victor Robles over the weekend, talked to the media after the game, one of these games. I think it was Sunday. Uh, Adam Judah has an article in the Times today, and there's a quote from Robles here, which is pretty interesting. He was asked about what he thought about his time in Seattle so far. He said, I just like it here. I want to stay here. I like the vibes the fans bring. I just really like Seattle. I would really like to stay here. And as soon as that quote came out, similar to the Cal Raleigh thing, a lot of fans were like, this is a no brainer. Lock this guy up long term. Let's sign him, do whatever it takes. And I don't disagree that it would be nice to keep him here, especially if he keeps playing like this. I think we all think he's going to regress at some point. But, this article from Jude does a pretty good job of breaking down some of the changes that they've made to his game since he's come to Seattle. He is the one guy. He is the hitting coach's one and only success story, and they made some changes to his swing, and it's actually worked. I mean, they're probably as shocked as anybody else. And so, if he keeps playing like this, best case scenario, he keeps playing like he's been playing all the way through the end of the year, and he gets a contract, whether it's from the Mariners or from somebody else. More realistic scenario probably is that he regresses a little bit, and in turn probably brings his value down a little bit, and it becomes easy to re-sign him. But I think the terms of his contract are going to be very interesting.
So yeah, let's talk about who Victor Robles is, because he was like a super prospect with the Nationals when the Nationals were just reeling off super prospects. Obviously, they had Strasburg, Harper, Soto, and then Robles was kind of in that, like, I think maybe even untouchable in trade talks at a point, like a guy who was super high level prospect, and also kind of comes up at the tail end of, I think, when center field defense was like the most valuable. It was kind of like catcher pitch framing, when catcher pitch framing took the place of center field defense in our minds. And so we were like, this dude is going to be. So, and then 2019, he actually puts up a respectable season. He's got a 92 WRC plus, 17 home runs, 28 steals, 3.7 wins above replacement, because he also has a very good defensive year, but he just never really hits after that. It never really hit before. I guess he had a brief stretch, 2018, in 66 plate appearances where he was good, but a guy that's putting up WRC plus in the 60s for the next 3 years. And then in Washington this year was struggling, and it leads to did he get released, and the Mariners picked him up on what was I can't remember.
Yeah, they picked him up for nothing. I mean, he's making the major league minimum. He got effectively cut, and the Mariners scooped him up, and it's been their best move of the year. I mean, as it turns out.
Yeah. So since joining the Mariners, he had a rough stretch. 33 WRC plus with the Nationals to start this year. Since joining the Mariners, he's batting 349, 411, 523, 170 WRC plus. Plays pretty good outfield defense still. 1.3 wins above replacement in only 36 games. So this is a dude, if he's a 4-win player, this is a guy that's worth $25 million a year. I don't think anyone, even if he spends the rest of the season at a 170 WRC plus, I don't think anyone's believing it to the point that he gets $25 million a year. But this to me feels a lot like when Geno Smith was playing well at the beginning of 2022. And I was calling for the Seahawks to extend him, because at a point it was like, just give this guy an extension, because like give him something between backup and starter money, and there's almost no downside. And I kind of feel like if you're the Mariners, you can't pay this, and Gino ends up getting like something like a market level deal. If you're going to pay Victor Robles what becomes like a market level deal for a guy that people feel has upside, that can hit and field, I'm scared as hell of that deal if it's longer than a year.
Well, I think it's going to be, this is why I say it's going to be pretty interesting. I don't think anyone knows exactly how to price this guy, because, usually when you see guys develop like this late, he's 27, I believe. They've either they have no prospect pedigree, or they certainly didn't have the decline that he did leading up to this. Either they've just never really popped, and now they're finally popping, so it makes sense to pay them, or, something else. They haven't been in the majors that long, whatever. But his story is so weird. The fact that he was such a huge prospect, played pretty well in his first season, and then has just been miserable ever since. that you almost don't know, like, is this all adrenaline? Like, is this like he comes to a new it's like anybody who starts a new job, right? I mean, like, it sounds like the end of his tenure in Washington was sucked. It sucked a lot.
Yeah.
It's like, and think about anybody who's ever had a job that they kind of didn't like after a while. It's like, not only are you disliking your job, but it's really hard to come and perform every day. And I think that's probably a little bit of that going on when he was with the Nats at the end there. And he comes here, just gets a fresh start. Like any of us who have ever started a new job, you come in with a lot of energy, usually work a little bit harder, stay a little bit more focused, and then naturally over time that declines a bit. We all know that. So it's interesting to see, like, is this going to decline at all for him, or is he just going to like really tap into that prospect potentially once had and keep this train rolling? And so I think that's why it's going to be tough to price him out in the offseason. The guy that comes to mind that I think of, a couple of years ago, the Mariners gave Dylan Moore one of the weirdest deals I've ever seen, which was, I looked it up before, and it was basically comes out to about 3 years and $9 million total. So about $3 million a year. I think Robles would get more than that because A, he plays a premium position where Dylan Moore was like a super sub, and B, the prospect pedigree. Dylan Moore had no prospect pedigree. Obviously Victor Robles does. But I think what he probably gets is like 2 years, 16 million. Like, he's going to have to be on another prove it deal. And the prove it deal is like, if you're giving this to a 27-year-old, what you're basically saying is like, look, dude, you're still hitting free agency again when you're 29. And as long as you keep performing for the next 2 years, you're going to get paid at 29 because you're still in your prime. So it benefits you in that respect. 2 years, 16 is more money than he's ever made. He's been on his rookie contract basically up to this point. So it's, in some ways it's a prove it deal. And I think that's what he's going to be looking at. If you can get Victor Robles for 2 years, 16 million in the offseason, and he, assuming he doesn't dramatically regress down the stretch of this year, I think that makes a lot of sense because you have a need in either of the outfield corners. Your outfield defense has been pretty bad, and he's an okay defender at worst. And if he gets more than that, if you're talking about even like 1 year, 15 million or something like that, a true prove it deal, I just can't imagine he'd get something that much. I can't imagine anyone would pay him that much. And I don't think anyone's locking him up for long term either.
So his salary is 2.65 million this year. 2 years, 16 million is pretty, it's on the verge of scary to me. Yeah. I think that's like a pretty good place to like to set the price at, and I think that it's what I would be interested in is if the Mariners jump free agency and they sign him to a shorter, like an extent, whatever it is. Let's say it was 2 years, 8 million, 2 years, 10 million, whatever it is. But before the season's over, you might have a little more leverage because it could continue to fall. It could come crashing down to earth moments after you have him sign that extension. And I'd be interested in that. I think anything more than like 2 years, $12 million or $6 million next year. And I'm like, I agree with you. Plays all three outfield positions fine. Good quality defender at all three positions. The bat is terrifying. There's a bunch of StatCast stats that say he's like doing it through not just luck, but what was the last time we were on? You were Randy Arozarena, like swinging bunts at a single, bunts. And you were like, oh, that's what you got him for. Victor Robles isn't doing that. His barrel rate's super high. He's doing it in ways that like even the hard hit rate isn't that high, but he's barreling the shit out of the ball. So is it a thing? Change of scenery, different coaching, whatever. Did the Mariners unlock something? Is he on steroids? I don't know. I mean, this is like the kind of thing. If this was 2004, we'd be like, this dude's on gear, as they say, as you gym goers say.
I mean, his average in Seattle, I know average is an antiquated stat, but he's got his season average up over 300 now, which is pretty remarkable when you look at his numbers the first half of the year with the Nats. I mean, it's kind of crazy that he's been able to get it back like that. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot to like about Victor Robles for sure. The other thing the Mariners have to think about is they have some really bad contracts on the books for next year. Mitch Garver is getting paid $12.5 million next year. Mitch Haniger is getting paid $16 million last year. I mean, you want to talk about all the mistakes that this front office made. I know they wanted to dump salary with Robbie Ray, and they did it, but they took on bad salary. I mean, at least Robbie Ray is going out there and pitching right now. Mitch Haniger has been a tough watch all season long, and
Well,
who
I think
knows if he
since
gets.
Robbie Ray made his debut, Mitch Haniger's actually been pretty good. I think he's got.
It's like he knew. It's like they're kindred spirits or something. But obviously, Garver. I mean, at this point, you have to think that 12.5 mil is probably a sunk cost. I'm sure they bring him. They let him come out with the team next year, but
Yeah.
like they're not going to cut him outright. But even still, I mean, what are you going to get out of this guy? Maybe if you can convert him to a full-time backup catcher, then at least you get some value there. But they do have some bad contracts on the books next year, and that makes things difficult. But I mean, what you have in Victor Robles is a guy who actually wants to be here, which doesn't happen a lot.
Well, it's also a guy that a couple months ago didn't think he might have had very many options. So
yeah, I'm sure he's happy. Yeah, as a result. But yeah, I mean, it seems. I guess the testament to the team and the relationship that he has with the Mariners right now is that they actually coached him in a way that we don't often give them credit for. It sounds like they coached him, they fixed some things, and they're actually paying off in games. You always hear about guys who tweaked something or did something with the coach, and you might see it pay off in a game for a week or so. It's been working the entire time Robles is here. So I mean, that's a positive sign. And it doesn't always work with every guy. You can't get through to every single player, but when you get through to one, you probably don't want to lose that. I mean, think about a guy like we've talked a lot about these guys in the home run game, but guys like Edwin Encarnacion, Jose Bautista, they had the right hitting coach in Toronto who was able to tap into what they had and make them great hitters. Maybe the Mariners can have a success story like that too.